Well, here we are once again in Krown's Crypto Cave. Welcome back, and it is time. It is time for Thursday morning analysis from a very bright and sunny Helsinki, Finland. A little bit too hot once again for myself, but oh well. Anyways, plenty to talk about today as once again, traditional markets on the move, and that is where all of the opportunity and all the fun is being had. Meanwhile, we're sitting here watching Bitcoin literally go in a straight fucking line. But we'll actually be focusing on it quite a bit here on the lower term time frames because there are actually quite a few things starting to line up for a more immediate and perhaps even actionable move. Anyways, looking at the Krown Chain application, which can be found at app.krownchain.net. And it is free, and you're more than welcome to take advantage of it. We are seeing that open interest actually on the move to the upside, above 2.1 billion, up from about 2 billion even yesterday. Which is interesting as we do see Bitcoin essentially have continuation in the current formation from the daily trend. What does that essentially imply? Well, it essentially implies the same thing that I've been saying for the last 2 fucking months. So I need to see a breakout of the high term time frame range. This information is a little bit too novel to really make too much of it, or at least I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. But what I want to see is the same things essentially as before. Either break above or below 9,900 or below 8,900. You could probably raise it up to about 9,000 now, and we'll document that today. Plus the read that we see on the open interest from that, as that should very likely spin off the next big macro move, or maybe not macro move, but major move. Very, 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 very likely, highly likely, you might even say. When we'll look at probabilities later, of course, with regards to the fear and greed index, we're ticking down 1 point, still kind of holding in there, and all the other top end metrics more or less the same. Bitcoin dominance still hanging at 62.25%, which is, just kind of holding the low side of the range right there. So we will take a look at individual altcoins as well. And what else do I want to say? Yes, the sale is still going on for one more day, through Friday, that is, and today being Thursday means, one more day. So no code is needed or anything. However, I should always remind you that if you are interested in these programs, make sure to watch the videos that accompany them. They're going to tell you who they're for, who they're not for, and then you as an adult can make your own decisions if they do speak to you. I would say at the outset, as I always say, which is probably getting fucking annoying right now for the people who watch these videos every day, make sure that you have enough time to invest in them because they are quite long, especially the TA program, the options program, and understand that they're this is like a long-term type of thing. Typically I see people come into their own around the year to a year and a half mark. Yes, there's definitely people who do reach there faster. Sometimes they have a good base to start off with, or maybe it's just, the content speaks to them a little bit more directly, whatever it might be. That does happen, but I also don't want to set people up with bad or false expectations because typically it is going to take some time plus a shit ton of effort on your own behalf as well. There's no magic pill. The Neophytes program though is a lot more geared towards beginners as it is a lot less intensive. It's about 10 hours. A little bit, maybe just a little bit over 10 hours in comparison to the other ones, which are 35 hours plus long, and really designed for people who really have just no idea what the hell they're doing. When it comes to just even putting an order on an exchange. So if you've been in this space for even 3, even maybe even 6 months, you're probably above the level of the content in there. Although it will go over trading plans as well. And risk management sort of fundamentals. As far as subscriptions go, we do have the Jewel still on a discount for a longer commitment, for a 3-month commitment, that is. And of course, with the Jewel, while it is a great tool, perhaps one of my most biggest secret weapons right now, it's still only as good as your risk management and position management for that matter. So if you're not already profitable, then it actually will not be that magic pill either. And again, another video that accompanies it explaining the tools. And then for our partner programs, we have More and Fall, who has actually made the Jewel and this app that we're using right here, right now. For PineScript Mastery, which is essentially what TradingView uses to code indicators. Alrighty, that's enough shilling for today. Let's get into Bitcoin price analysis right in over here. Or actually, do we want to start off with Bitcoin? No, let's go back to traditional markets. Bitcoin's fucking flat, although I still think that it comes down here. Looking at that's it. That's your analysis. Go fuck yourself. Just kidding. Let's go check out NASDAQ futures because I think that we've had a pretty damn good eye on this one as of recent times. We did say yesterday a move back up to the top side of the range, and what do you know? We got to move back up to the top side of the short-term range, right around 10,750-ish region. That move gets rejected, yes, and we come down to the bottom side of the range, at which point we're kind of resting on right now. The daily is really looking like this is a nice, at the very least, medium-term time frame top, which I do think is going to take some time to play out with some sideways and downside consolidation, as we said over the last couple days. And I would be holding on to this view more accurately said, as long as we're closing, especially dailies, below 10,750. But even if we did close above 10,750, I would look for a move maybe up to like 10,800, 10,850-ish region, but potential another lower high to be put in right there. And I'm looking for this to be topped out essentially, at least for a medium-term time frame sort of deal. Unless if that criteria is met that I just kind of denoted. So to come full circle on this one, remember we had this target in at 11,000 going all the way back to May, right? And that was not just a target from the inverted head and shoulders right here, but it was also an algo-driven target from the bearish retracement, actually, which got undone at the 1.414 fib extension right there. So retracement turns into an extension, and that was essentially met. And I would be looking for this to really spend some time, at the very least, going sideways here. And like I said, overall, it's going to depend on the weekly right now. So I feel like we've had a lot of the easy trades in NASDAQ, in NAS futures for this week. Now I really want to see the weekly, where the weekly closes. And if the weekly closes anywhere below 10,800, I do believe that this really does have potential to be a nice top, at least maybe for a long-term trade, back down to the weekly supports, which the 10 simple is all the way down at 99.50. So it'll probably rise up to about 10,000 at the start. That fucking spoon is so goddamn annoying. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. I don't know if you guys can hear that in the microphone, but Jesus fucking Christ, man. It's like nails on a chalkboard to my ears. Okay, all right. So ding, ding, ding. Dinner's ready, you bitch. Goddamn. Anyways, sorry. I love my girlfriend. It's just the fucking spoons, man. They're annoying. Anyways, all right. So, all right. No, that stopped. Anyway, so if the weekly does close below 10,800, I really do believe that this actually does have potential to be a long-term top, and that'll be only confirmed coming into next week, which will be had if we essentially take out this week's low, which would confirm this as a nice doji-ish type top, nice good old doge dildo type top. Plus follow through to the downside and be looking for a move, like I said, to the 10 simple, which should probably be coming in around 10,000 on next week if that were to happen. So there's really not too much, in my opinion, to be done right now. Is the question, do we bounce up on Friday and close somewhere between where we are right now and 10,800? That's fine. That essentially allows that possibility to be going on into next week. And like I said, above 10.8 and especially 10.850, that does get undone essentially. But as long as that condition is met, I do believe that probably do see a move back down to the 21 at the very least on the daily. That's 10.4, and then weekly supports at about 10,000 even. Nice round psychological number as well. So that would be another interesting area to be looking for a short or medium term time frame bounce, and then we'll come back and reassess after that. What's very interesting to me as well is all of the market leaders are essentially looking like they have put in some good medium term tops at the very least, maybe even a long term top. Like I said, I'm just going between Microsoft and Apple right now. But basically, these guys were kind of leading to the upside alongside NASDAQ. We're going into rotations is essentially what's happening, and as long as Microsoft and Apple are looking like they want to kind of play out a little bit of sideways and down, I would be skeptical of the rest of the market. Now, when I do say rotations, what that essentially means is that the first sort of sector, which is the tech sector, which essentially led this charge to the upside, when they're done rallying, then it's up to the next sort of strongest sector to kind of put the burden on their backs and rally up, and we'll see how far they get. I'm actually not really I'm not in tune enough with the market to know exactly which one it is. I would imagine it's probably retail, if I just had to guess off the top of my head. But basically, we'll go through the rotations, and then over time, if the market cycle actually does want to switch and it does put in a major top here, then we'd likely see NASDAQ lead to the downside once again. So that's why I'm keeping my eyes on these techs, and why I don't really think it's too necessary to be looking at the other ones. Although it would, if I was directly trading traditional markets, I would be keeping more of an intentful eye there. But looking at Microsoft right here, it's the same sort of chart really. As long as it's below about 210, 212, I do think that we have a nice medium-term top in. Weekly closure is going to be very enlightening as well. We do technically, or actually no, we do not have a bearish engulfing. But any sort of a closure below 210, and I would be looking for sort of the same synonymous moves that we see potentially unfolding next week into NASDAQ. So it's really all about this weekly closure. Today and tomorrow are more just setting up for what's kind of possible coming into next week. I think that the easy trades, like I said, have been had. Short term, does it pop back up? Yeah, it looks like it probably pops back up. Maybe test 209, something like that. But I'd be looking for it to play out the range a little bit longer between basically this area right here at 205 and this area right here at about 210ish region. Yeah, is what I'd be watching above 210. Yes, I would look for a move back up towards 213ish region, and then potentially this just continues onwards and upwards, and this is the market that never goes down. And below about 205, especially on a higher term time frame closure, and I'd be looking for retracements back down below 200. Apple, same sort of thing. Although actually a lot more strong, and this one actually closing on a higher high yesterday. This chart would be very easy to throw a lot of people off, and myself included, especially considering the way that it kind of reacted yesterday. But I do believe that we're seeing the same thing here as well. The range just a little bit more skewed in favor of the upside. In fact, at 396 the upside is where I'd be watching, and short term to the downside I'd be keeping an eye right here at about 388. But realistically, the range is bigger here because it is a bigger number overall. We're dealing with a $300 number rather than a $100 number, and the next big leg down I'd expect below about 379. So that's essentially what I'd be watching right there. But this one actually is in some ways a little bit easier to read because we do actually have what would be considered a hangman dildo right here. Is it a hangman dildo or what do you want to call it? They all have special names. It's basically a potential reversal dildo, and the way that we confirm it as a reversal dildo on the daily is taking out the low side of it. The low side of it traded down towards 386 yesterday, and if that did happen, I'd look for a test of the bottom side of the medium-term range. Once again, 379, and go from there. But same thing. Want to see the weekly closure. Weekly closure anywhere here or lower essentially does align with the same sort of potential that we looked at on Microsoft and NASDAQ coming into next week as well. And that's really what I'd be holding out for. We'll check out Tesla too, because I think Tesla's like kind of the hot commodity. It's the same fucking chart here, really. Anywhere below 1600, and I do think that we very likely have this blow off top in place for a while on a weekly closure. However, it looks like it is going to give another test to the top side of the short term range here at 1600ish region, probably sometime into today. And then if it does take it out, it's a little bit more diabolical. It's not as easy as the other ones to get. 1650 is obviously going to be an area of interest for a short term, but it's realistically all the way up to 1700 where I keep my eyes on. As long as it's below there, I do still think that this is likely a top. And it's kind of blown its lids, and the tears coming over the next few months. But again, what's most likely for today? Some sideways within range. If it breaks the range, then yes, I would adjust that up to the level that I spoke about. Now that we look at a daily, could chart it like this at 1650 as well. Depends what time frame that you're using. If you're using an hourly, I'd use 1700 to kind of undo the current top. If you're using a daily, I'd use 1650 and watch 1650 coming into the weekly closure tomorrow. If we do close below there, I do think coming into next week we do have potential to really confirm this by taking out the low side of this weekly tick thus far, 1431, which would then very likely initiate a move back down to about 1200ish region short term, and likely extend somewhere towards a 10 simple overall before we get our next nice bouncy bounce. Anyways, let's now go into Krown. Can you speak English? No, actually I can't. I don't know that language. All right, let's go over to Bitcoin action right here. And again, the reason why I cover, the reason why I cover those things is because, we see Bitcoin related to traditional markets on the macro, and Bitcoin's inability to put in a rally while everything else in the fucking world is rallying right now, even shitcoins, is not a sign of strength. And while I wouldn't necessarily say that that's a death sentence in and of itself, it does likely align with the probabilities that we will come back down and swipe around 8950 to 9,000-ish region right here, which is essentially the same thing that we've been looking at for the last couple months now. Also in line with the Cyan 89 exponential moving average, and also in line with the 236 Fibonacci retracement right here. All of these are lining up with our bottom side support for this formation, and that's essentially what Bulas are watching. Hey, whoa, no laughing. Hey, no laughing in the background. Elsa's laughing, so there'll be none of that. No nanos for you, you motherfucker. Anyways, so basically what Bulas are watching and what Bulas have going for them is essentially still rising bottoms here. So the second that area does get destroyed, and I'm talking about 8950 to 9,000-ish region, is the second that Bulas no longer have something on the higher term timeframes in play. And realistically, this would really start to look like a Wyckoff distribution top, and the measure move alongside a confirmation of the break of that, which would be below 8950-ish region, would actually be pointed down towards the high 7,000s, low 8,000s, also kind of in line with the 382 fib right here, which I believe is somewhere around the weekly 55 if I had to guess. The thing with this is right now is that, until we actually do break below this area, do I target a move like that? No, I don't, but things do look rather anemic here and rather droopy on the daily, closing below both the 10 simple and the 21 exponential moving average and even the 55 last night. While momentum also is turned down, while rejecting the bullish control zone is not a good sign. Daily RSI losing the exponential as well, and just kind of oscillating between, aimlessly between the neutral zone and testing the bearish control zone. Again, not a death sentence in and of itself, but there is something that I really that I do want to show here, and credit to the people in the Jewel channel for calling this one out. But the daily Jewel on CMEs did print a decent sell signal right here, which we covered on 9th of June. Remember, these things take a while to play out sometimes, and gave a hodl your short signal right here, or is in the process of giving a hodl your short signal right here, which will be confirmed later tonight if we turn down from this region. So that is also of particular interest to myself, again, as daily Stokes are on CMEs, not even getting out of the neutral zone, but turning back down towards the bearish control zone, and will confirm there with any sort of a closure basically here or lower below 92.50, and that's on CMEs. So on spot price action, that same area would be actually 92.60, which is interesting because we're basically just following that same downtrend. And remember, I was speaking about this as well, and this is one of those things. Motherfucker, you goddamn charting tools. Let's get a fresh chart. There we go. This is another thing that I was kind of postulating the other day, and I've been playing around with this quite a bit. And we actually can make trend lines on the reverse Stoke indicator cross, and it actually does work rather well, especially on the weekly, of which we did this yesterday. And Bulas look away. Bulas look away. I promise you don't want to see this. We can actually go all the way back, maybe even to 20,000 if we put this on log scale. Yeah, we can. Very, very interesting right there. Something like that. You can see that actually did get the $20,000 high, the $14,000 high right here, the retest right here, and then more recently turning down as we get towards the same trend line. Now, do I trust this? Do I trust that stuff? A ton? No, I don't. Not as much as my usual tools, but I do think that it's rather interesting, as it has played out pretty damn well on the macro scale. So, could it be that we're doing something like this, where we have these two as converging lines of hope and despair? Perhaps. Yeah, could be, yes, which would imply a pretty fucking big range, to be fair. So we'll get into that. We'll kind of go into the nitty gritty now, but getting a little bit ahead of myself, I think, right now. Okay, let's go back. Let's go down to the 12-hour, and let's go back to GDAX and follow this chart. We can see we start to really see now that there's a great relationship that's really been forming and strengthening between the daily 12-hour and 4-hour, as all the momentum oscillators continue to remain in their downside posturing as long as we follow these last set of lower highs right here, putting in 94.50ish region right here, and then 9300-ish region right here. And as you can see, the 12-hour remains with downside posturing as long as we essentially follow that trajectory. And the 12-hour Stokes obviously, nose diving right there into the bearish control zone, which offers up a nice and easy way to be kind of managing risk. Obviously, if you're on the very short-term time frames, 9300 makes sense. 94.50 right here, a little bit more dependable, I suppose, but But again, following that trend line, we do see that the immediate pressure is to the downside as long as we're especially below 9,300 and to a large extent 9,450-ish region. So that's really the message that I want to have. I'm not saying that Bitcoin can't flip back around. I'm not saying that Bitcoin can't stab the top side of the range again. I'm just saying that the short-term momentum and medium-term momentum and even daily momentum remains to the downside as long as Bitcoin is especially below 9,300-ish region and to a lesser extent 9,450-ish region. So that's the picture that I want to be painting. In the sense, to put it in another way, I would not be bullish until at least wow, I can't fucking speak. Jesus Christ. I would not be bullish for even a short or medium term time frame trade as long as Bitcoin's below 9,450. Now, if Bitcoin does get above 9,450, especially even 9,350 might be a good warning sign, but I wouldn't trust it as much because it's not as obvious as a local high. I would look for extension very quickly to 9,700, and very likely that would play off a short term down from there. However, overall, I'd look for the medium term extension all the way up to about 9,900 or 10,000, this blue box territory up here, at which point this whole formation would look a lot more like Wyckoff accumulation, and this would look very, very healthy. And we could talk about targets if it does break north of 9,900 towards 11,000 and beyond. But for right now, seeing as Bitcoin's hinting at a lot more of a downside posturing, I think that it's just more appropriate to talk about the downside as it is right now. It's just more likely. So with that in mind, let's go down to the 4-hour, which actually didn't even show. But the 4-hour showing momentum remains to the downside as long as we're below about 9,200-ish region. So keep that one in mind as well. And you can see that it's really starting to struggle here. We have been following this trend line too, which has been tested a few times, which usually does weaken it over time. So it's going to be very interesting to see where we close these next few slew of 4-hour dildos right there. 4-hour historical volatility percentile coming down quite hard as well. So we are once again back in the single digits. And as always, reminding myself that that the daily is absolutely crushed here. Now, there was a good discussion in the members channel yesterday. Someone called me out and said, Krown, but if you use different settings for the historical volatility percentile, then this is actually not the lows that we've been for the longest time. And you're right. If we use a 365 here rather than a 100 is what I was using before, naturally that will change it. And actually your longest period of time in the dumps was end of 2018 before the big bad drop from about 6,000 to 3,000. And as you can see right now, would drastically kind of change what we're looking at right here. And is this the right way to be doing things? Well, there's not necessarily a right or wrong way to be doing things, but this would be actually more accurate to that, and it makes sense. So, and I think that I am wrong, or at least my way of doing it before with the 10-100 is going to be less accurate here. The reason why is because, well, when you have a 365, you're going to be including a lot more data points. So obviously over here in motherfucker, I just need to learn the undo button. But over here in 2018, right, Bitcoin was spending a lot more time on the whole in relationship to the last year, the last 365 data points, really contracting, during that time, as you can see. Whereas over here, Bitcoin has really only been kind of in this contraction phase for the last 3 months, going from May to where we are right now. Whereas again, compared to 2018, the big contraction, as you can see, kind of started around here in February 2018 and then got resolved in November 2018 and just got more and more aggressive as time went on. Bitcoin was quite volatile going from both Bitcoin's quite volatile going from both 10,000 down to 4,000, then up to 10,000, then where we are right now. It's really only been this way for the last 3 months. But that also brings up another discussion. Well, that would make sense that the 100 period on that would obviously make more sense, because that's about 3 months. And yes, for the last 3 months, this area right here, this consolidation has been winding up incredibly tight, even tighter than the last 3 months of 2018. So it depends on your interpretation of it, realistically. But I understand the counterpoint to that, and we can kind of just explain why one way is preferable to the other. In my opinion, I would actually think that the 100 in this case would be better, just because it would tell you about this consolidation relative to this consolidation. So you're getting the reads only pertinent to the last 100 days, which is this area right here. Obviously, if we include this, this over here in the calculations, which will be naturally included because we're including 365, basically a year's worth of price action data, then it's been Bitcoin's been quite fucking volatile, as you can see. I always love it when people say, those CME bastards, they tamed Bitcoin. I don't think that this is tame at all, man. You tell me an asset that's moved in the last 3 years, both 85% to the downside, 400% to the upside, and then another 70% to the downside is fucking tame. Are you out of your goddamn mind? Are you fucking crazy? Have you lost your fucking mind? Those evil CME people, they're taming Bitcoin. It's like, oh my God, you're so silly. You're so silly. Explain that to me. Hey, explain that to me. Why don't you? Anyways, what else do you want to talk about here? We didn't really go through the very low time frames like the 3 hour and below, but let's check them out right now. 3 hour momentum remains to the downside as long as we're below 92.50. 2 hour momentum remains to the upside, actually, as long as we're above 91.70. And hourly momentum remains to the downside as long as we're below about 91.90. So a lot of flip-flopping there in the lower term time frames. So we're actually not really getting good confluence, but the medium and higher term time frames are suggesting that essentially as long as Bitcoin's below or at or even at 9,200, direction is down and very likely to test into that 8,900-ish to 9,000-ish region once again. Does that mean that we're going to break 8,900 to 9,000-ish? No, it doesn't mean that. But anytime that we come back down to that area, well, obviously it's a possibility. So yes, Bitcoin does do one of let's see, can we do 2 or 3 things? I would say one of 2 things. If Bitcoin closes a 4-hour dildo below 8,900, I would constitute that as a breakdown or confirmation of a breakdown to the downside, initiate targets at the very least to like the high 7,000s with bounces probably at the mid 8,000s. By the same token, we could also use the 12-hour or the daily, which a 12-hour or daily dildo closure below 9,000, and I do believe we would essentially initiate the same effect with that breakdown. Also should denote this as well as kind of rounding out the bearish bias, if you want to call it that. And that's this, the weekly Stoics right here, which have been pretty damn good over the history of Bitcoin. Anytime that they get above the critical zone right here and then come back down below the critical zone, that's your big bad retracements. BBRs. And, last example we have was back on this area right here. You already know where I'm going with this, for almost an immediate move of about 41%, and like half a year later, another 50% to the downside. Well, and then like another few months after that, 70% to the downside. We have this one right here, almost immediate 41%. Then a couple weeks later, another 70% to the downside. We have this example right here, and you should probably line them up yourself, 30%. But basically, I'm referring to this one right here, here, and here. And it's basically all these retracements, of which you'll notice that there's seems to be some sort of a rhyme going on between these 40% retracements on most of these, sometimes 30%, but a nice range being constructed. Yeah, there we go, another 30% one right there, 34% one right there. You get what I'm talking about. And if we were to play around with the numbers, assuming that this does break to the downside, using history as a governor, 30% to the downside would put us in the mid 7,000s. 40% to the downside would put us at the 200 simple and 200 exponential average long term. And that does make sense with the monthly structure. So now I need to be very careful with what I'm saying, because while I do think that Bitcoin could have some downside here, the bi-monthly and quarterly charts, they're actually quite healthy long term. It's just the numbers are quite big, so the ranges are humongous, and we could come all the way down to low 8,000, upper 7,000, and not even tap into the 10 simple right here, which is kind of governing our uptrend on these rising bottoms. Even down to the 21 exponential average isn't all that problematic, and that's in the mid 7,000s, or sorry, low 7,000s. Upper 6,000. So, it's perspective giving right here, but that also means that Bitcoin can come down to those levels and still remain long-term macro bullish, if you want to call it that, if you're using like a quarterly chart to judge your trend, which I think is maybe a little bit too high of a time frame at this point in Bitcoin's history. Maybe another like 5 to 10 years, it'll take on some more meaning. We just don't even have enough history even for like a reasonable 21 exponential average here, let alone a fucking 200. I mean, that's not happening anytime soon, right? Well, maybe somewhat soon. It's going to take 200 quarters essentially. So I don't know. I can't do the math right now. Same thing on the quarterly chart right here as well. So I do think that it would be an opportunity if Bitcoin actually did break down. And I'd really maintain perspective that the long term is still actually not, or the macro is still actually not bearish as long as we're above about like 6,900-ish region. That's when that becomes a rather big problem. Let me just make sure that I'm recording and the microphone's working. It looks like it is. And let's go check out my secondary chart right here. Whoops, nope. We'll look at probability soon, but I want to look at this first. So we'll check back in on the good old Trollinger bands. And perhaps even the McDonald's as well. And we see yet again another consecutive close below the 20 simple on daily CME Trollinger band. It's just a 20 simple right here. And it does have a negative slope, which, throughout the history of Bitcoin, anytime that Bitcoin likes to hug that and then break below, well, that was this one right here. That's a nice 37% down. Similar to what we saw right here, hugs it for a while, gets a negative slope, and then boom, massive move to the downside. Can take some time as well, but very interesting nonetheless. And as long as you're below that, it does offer up a very easy way to be managing risk. I mean, it's just a natural point. Doesn't mean that's going to 100% work out, but I think this is still a little bit more obvious on spot price action if we go over right here, because we actually did get our first closure below the 20 simple in the past like week or so, and the second that we get a consecutive open and close below it on spot, I would be looking for a move to the bottom side at the very least of the Trollinger bands, and guess where that is? 9,000. Again, does not imply that we're going to actually break below there, but I do think that we test it, and anytime that we test it, it's going to have a potential to break, and that's the big one to me right now. And as Bitcoin kind of hugs it, hugs the 20 simple right here, it does start to really flatten off and maybe even get a negative slope in the next day or two if it closes below, especially. If we look at this on a weekly, it should also be noted that there is hidden bearish divergence on weekly MACDs right here, as they actually do start to converge on each other a little bit. In the making right there, and usually you will get a move down to the 20 simple based upon that read as well, and that's actually at the low $8,000 to upper $7,000 target. So there is good confluence here for that move to the downside, but still I need to see that trigger hit before at least myself takes trading positions in that direction. Of course, this is not financial advice, and I'm not a financial advisor, and that's a personal thing of how you trade that or not. I'm just sharing my opinion on this one. By the way, MACDs on the daily, also looking for a little bit of a crossy down, but that's not necessarily the best way to be using it. In fact, that's a very rudimentary way to be using it. And actually, we do have hidden bearish divergence on daily MACD histogram as well between this point and this point. That's 31st of May high at about a little bit above 10,000 versus our last high right here at about 9,500-ish region, which is quite the stark contrast. Anyways, my point is that if Bitcoin does essentially close another daily total below the 20 simple, and especially take out 9,000 while the MACD crosses once again to the downside, that would be a damn good signal that we are going to see a pretty nice move to the downside, as you're going to see momentum turn in that direction, plus basically a rejection to get back above the zero read right here, alongside Bitcoin also breaking a major support area. As we've been documenting it out, so that would that would be very good for judging resolution on this as a whole as well, alongside the reads that I'd be looking for in what's called open interest right here. I'd want to see either a massive spike up in open interest, I'm talking like 300 to 500 million, or a massive spike down of the same nature. Those would be damn good for me to really jump onto a trendy move. And how that's typically how Bitcoin plays those ones out, right? It puts in its 3 months long of consolidation going sideways, boring the shit out of everyone, and then trends for like 2 to 3 weeks, and that's all that you get. And then you go into another long form consolidation, and then you might get another 2 to 3 weeks of trend as well. It's just been par for the course on Bitcoin for a while now, and we saw this in end of 2019 right here, 3 months. We saw this at beginning of 2019 right here for 3 months. We saw this at end of 2018 right here for 3 months, and then several times in the run up over here in the years precipitating that. So it does work to both sides, but perspective for Bitcoin right now is very close to resolution. We do see that the volume signature on this is incredibly mature. I mean, it's really pretty much even almost at the apex by now. Just a few days left to go. I think on the 21st it'll officially be there. It can choose a direction at any moment in time that it decides, that it wants right now. Anytime that it gets about 70% full or more, it is very, very, very statistically likely to break. For a big boy one, especially considering that we do seem to have quite a bit of open interest on the board right now as well. So let's go into the lower term timeframes and mark off those areas and look at probabilities. So, I'm going to, I do think that 9,300 is a good warning sign for Bitcoin kind of flipping back up for a short term move to the upside. Technically speaking, though, 9,450 is a lot more manageable because that's an obvious potential lower high, or it is a lower high on the daily. Is 9,300 a lower high on the daily? It kind of is, kind of isn't. I wouldn't necessarily consider that one on the daily a lower high. Maybe on like a 4 hour could be. Yeah, you could maybe make that argument on a 4 hour. I wouldn't necessarily say on a daily. So as it stands right here, I'll keep on using 9,450 to the upside, and that would very likely spin off a move towards 97. And personally speaking, I do think that would initiate hidden bullish divergence, which still is a potential on the 3-day. Although the more hesitation here, the more it gets unraveled. In fact, it will be undone by this next tick. If it does fail to get that move to the upside, in fact, which is actually rather good timing, but that would initiate the move likely to extend all the way to 9,900 or 10,000, at which point, this starts to look like an ascending triangle and looks like reaccumulation, I should say, and we could target moves, like I said, to 11,500 this region. But for right now, it's under pressure, and the lack of movement here, especially in this next. Do we close this one tonight? No. Yes, we do actually. So another closure below the 21 exponential moving average probably does put the nail in the proverbial coffin right there. Anyways, what was I just on? 2-day, kind of putting another lower high as well. Yeah, that's what we wanted to look at. Probabilities. Jesus Christ, Krown. That's why half the people even come here. So I'll keep 94. It's basically the same shit as yesterday, actually. I'll cut the downside range to the middle at 8,950 between 8,900 and 9,000-ish region. And let's see. So upside probability is 25%, and the downside probability is just under 28%. You'll notice now, if you go to yesterday's video, that the upside probability is now less than the downside probability. So naturally, as we said, without Bitcoin popping back up above 9,450, it does inherently get more and more bearish, or at least that's the interpretation from that perspective. And now we officially seen the probability shift in the favor of the downside. I would expect to see the same thing on the 12-hour as well, and we do see the same thing, 18.65% to the upside versus 20.5% to the downside. And the rings, once again, on the 12-hour are starting to squeeze, mostly sideways, but a slight downward slope now, a very slight downward slope, but that will put pressure. And same thing with the daily as well. I'm technically not on future, but let's see if that changes it. Hasn't really been changing it all that much recently because volatility is so low. Yeah, it's pretty much the same. So slight downside twist does goose the probabilities in that favor just ever so slightly. Looking at Ball and Pig's moms, it does look like they're turning down again on the 12-hour, which actually has been pretty damn good, and the daily is just starting to make a negative histogram here. So I keep an eye on that, as I'm curious how the last few signals of that have worked out. Not so well on the daily, actually. Yeah, not so well on the daily, just looking at it from that perspective. I mean, nothing's really working well as far as momentum goes right now, because momentum on a daily isn't, when we're going sideways in a relatively tight range, isn't going to really help. So can't really expect too much from it to begin with. But the probabilities is very interesting to notice that yes, it is starting to really gear in the favor of the downside. So another couple days without failure to break above, especially 9,450, and I do think that we naturally see this one set up for not the best next week. We'll put it that way. Alrighty. Okay. Do we want to talk about some Forex? Have I bored you enough yet? Let's go look at let's go look at some shitcoins. Is Butyrol versus Bitcoin still looking good? Yes. It is, actually. So this is also interesting to me too. A lot of altcoins versus Bitcoin are looking good. Butyrol versus Bitcoin looks like it wants to pop up to 0.0277 still. Litecoin versus Bitcoin actually looks shitty as fuck. So maybe not all of them, maybe just a few of them. Hidden bearish divergence potentially in play. I'd probably be looking for it to come back down to 45,000 or 450,000. What about Ripple Me Nipples over here? Same thing. Wow, a downtrend for the eternity of eternity. Motherfucker. What else do we have? Do we have some Tron cash over here? Tron actually doesn't look bad right here. Well, probably does come down. Probably does come down to like 0.0166. It's going to do whatever Bitcoin does at the end of the day. GBDC, down, down, down. Down we go. Where do we stop? Only Bear Jesus knows. BNB. What do we see here? Weekly still looks okay. As long as it's above the 55, it's hard to hate, but it is still a weekly downtrend. So there is that. What about Cardano versus Bitcoin? Looks a little bit toppy to me on a daily. And if you sing it nice, sweet lullabies, then you'll even notice that there's bearish divergence here as well. And I'd probably be looking for this one to have a nice move down to 1,200 Satoshis. And then we'll see where the weekly closes. I could still be bullish on this one long term, but short term, medium term, I think this one comes down a bit. Weekly still kind of in a long term downtrend, to be fair. But I want to see the weekly closure before I talk too much shit about that one. Link, what are you doing, Link? Are you not going up right now? Oh man, Link has one. Ooh, we officially have 3 drives. 1, 2, 3 of bearish divergence on the 4 hour. So it's going back to 0 after having multi years of an uptrend. Now it's probably coming back down to like 84,500 Satoshis, but am I still bullish on this one on a higher term time? It's hard. I can't hate this chart. It's great. I mean, it's still the best chart in cryptocurrency land. I'd really want to see the weekly closure anywhere here or higher by Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. I'd be looking for new all-time highs coming into next week. And to be honest, I do think that this one does actually continue. Just looking at the weekly, I mean, this is a very, 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 very strong trend. Yes, it's a little bit of a blow, going into a little bit of a blow off phase right here, but I do think that it might have another stab or two. I wouldn't count it out just yet, but it is getting close though. What about gold? I love gold. That's my very bad, very poor gold member impression. Really underrated movie, by the way. Really underrated. Let's see. What do we have here? A little bit of potential hidden regular bearish divergence potentially in play. If we do take out yesterday's low at 1802, I'd look for a move probably to test back down to 1785 region. But weekly still looks like it's potentially still trending here. I mean, it is still trending, but I want to see the closure on this one as well. A closure here or higher by tomorrow. And I'd be looking for a move towards 1850 to 1900 into next week in the weeks to follow. It would look pretty damn good. Let's go look some Forex too. Where's my fiat shitcoins? Pound yen, reversing off the area that we spoke about last week, and I do think that it comes back down to the low side of the range, 132.25 now. Swiss franc, US dollar, probably short-term bounce here, but ultimately I do think that this one's medium-term toppy and comes down to 104.8 region, something like that. Pound dollar, same sort of thing. I think that a lot of these things are getting stopped right at the right time. It's hard. Don't bet against the dollar right now. I'd be looking for 123.5. Yen dollar is bullish. I'd be looking for a move back up towards 94 cents. Or is that 94? Or that's not 0.94. Yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I mean to say. Aussie dollar looks bullish here. Nice ascending triangle. On the highs thus far, but need to see it have some follow through, any sort of a daily closure above 70 cents, and I'll be looking for extension very likely to 72 cents. Looks like it's the next big region, but long term, very shitty chart, very, very shitty chart. 72 cents is actually right at the 200 simple and 200 exponential moving average on the weekly, so that gives you any idea of how weak this fucking thing is. Jesus Christ, man. And I think that's about it. Oh, we didn't even look at SPY futures. Ooh, interesting close yesterday. A little bit of a tweezer top here, right at the breakout point as well. I'll stick with what I've been saying. I won't get bullish on this one. Looking for a move to 233 until we get a daily closure above 223 323. Oh my God, 323 closure above, and I'd look for a move to 333. Did I get that right? Yeah, 335. And 323 right here. Okay, there we go. Okay, got my numbers right. Still hard to hate. We have these rising bottoms and rising tops here. It isn't an uptrend, and daily does potentially will potentially put in some bearish divergence, but Oh man, that's a tough one. I don't feel as confident on this one as I do on Nasdaq. I'd say a healthy amount of I don't know here. It does still look like it wants to take a leg up towards 333 region, 335 region. It depends how these rotations go, but it does look like that still. We'll see how Friday closes, and that'll probably drive the bias coming into next week. I think Nasdaq and the techs are easy to read right now though, and I think now is a good time to wrap up Bitcoin. So we'll go back to her for just a second here, and. Does 9,300 matter? It's a very short-term move right there. I think that it is good for a red flag, but technically speaking, I'd still use 9,450 to the upside. As long as we're below there, the bias, at least for myself, is to the downside, looking for a move to 8,900 to 9,000-ish region, of which I'd probably look for another short-term bounce. We'll see how that bounce, does after that. By the way, the 4 hours actually kind of, not really a signal there, I guess. But if Bitcoin could take out 9,450 to the upside, I'd look for extension to 97 and probably realistically 9,900 to 10,000 after a quick consolidation, maybe a little bit lower than 97. But overall, with Bitcoin being below 9,450, pressure is to the downside, trend is to the downside on timeframes below a daily, and that is probably where I want to leave you off right now. So I'd like to wish you the best of the best and the happiest of the happiest. I'm going to sign off now. Take care, and until next time.